Good morning, everybody. I'd like to formally welcome you all to the official launch of the University of Aberdeen's Centre for Energy Transition, a milestone for the university and our Aberdeen 2040 strategy. It's my delight to welcome you all to the event today. Achieving the global Paris goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees requires a transformative change across our economy and our society, involving our industries, our workplaces, and our communities. With more than 3/4 of greenhouse gas emissions attributed to any energy production and use, we have a significant challenge and opportunity to transform our energy systems. In Scotland, we're aiming for a 75% reduction in emissions by 2030 and achieving net zero by 2045. This transformation, or transition, will shift us out of a carbon-intensive energy system to one that is decarbonised, diverse, and socially and ecologically sustainable. It must be a just transition, one that unleashes green jobs across the economy for all, invests in education, skills and training at all levels, and provides opportunities, particularly for our young people in the green recovery. A just transition upskills and reskills the current workforce into new green energy jobs across the supply chain and commits to manufacturing the transition as we expand into industries such as offshore wind, energy efficiency, hydrogen, and carbon capture and storage. A just transition empowers communities who are active participants and not passive recipients of change. It unleashes a wave of social innovation that underpins the behavioural changes that are necessary and are critical for any energy transition to succeed. Now, just transition ensures that changes do not unduly impact on those with the least ability to pay. The transition is a significant opportunity to reshape our world. It will leverage low carbon finance to triple global investment in renewable energy to 1.6 trillion US per annum by 2030. And we'll see significant advances in low carbon generation, electrification, and clean fuels. Fuel poverty and energy security should be at the center of our mission. Almost 1 billion people worldwide do not have access to electricity, and more than 3 billion lack access to clean cooking facilities. In Scotland, fuel poverty is still a substantial issue of concern, with over 600,000 households living in fuel poverty. At every step, we must remind ourselves that Sustainable Development Goals are our guide, and that energy transition must support the economy, our society, and the environment. Over the next decade, we're going to see a step change in the transition to a decarbonised energy sector. We'll see the transformation of the North Sea with a four-time expansion of offshore wind in the next 9 years. Hydrogen is going to play a major role in the transition, with both the UK 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution and the Scottish Government's hydrogen policy statement, both committing to the production of 5 gigawatts of capacity of low carbon and renewable hydrogen by 2030. We'll see a revolution in the electrification of transport and sustainable local travel, a stronger focus on energy efficiency in homes and businesses, and the diversification of power and heat across smart local grids, and the rise of prosumers, where households store and sell power back to the grid. Our mission for the Centre for Energy Transition is to pioneer cutting-edge solutions-oriented research and education to advance a just energy transition. Our approach is unique, drawing upon the experience of over 150 staff across the university, across a range of scientific disciplines, to solve these problems and to train the energy experts of the future. The Centre for Energy Transition builds capacity across 8 key themes where we're building critical mass in topics such as renewable generation, development of the hydrogen economy, supporting the delivery of CCUS and bioenergy, energy policy reform, and building social acceptance and participation. I would encourage you to visit our website where you can learn more about our themes and our activities, meet our champions, and engage with us on the journey. Our door is always open, and the Centre aims to provide a one-stop shop for accessing our diverse and interdisciplinary research. We're addressing the challenge of educating the future energy workforce by adapting our existing programs and degrees and developing new, innovative and flexible offerings in energy transition. This includes our first UK's first postgraduate degree in energy transition systems and technologies, launching in September, and our new short course in energy transition fundamentals for over 160 master's students, which we're launching tomorrow in partnership with Total Energies. Energy transition can't be done in isolation. It involves partnership and working together to this common goal. We invite you to join us on this journey, to engage with us and co-develop the solutions. Now, we have a fantastic lineup today, and I'm really looking forward to our insightful presentations from our special guests and partners on how we can deliver a transition in practice. My sincere thanks to Professor George Boyne, Principal of the University, Right Honourable Anne-Marie Trevelyan, the Minister for Business, Energy and Clean Growth, Keith Anderson, Chief Executive of Scottish Power, Jean-Luc Guizou, Managing Director of Total Energies UK, Steve Scrimshaw, Vice President of Siemens Energy, and Alison Stewart from Aberdeen Climate Action. Also, a big welcome to you all for joining us online this morning, and thanks for attending this event, and thanks for our staff in public affairs, events and marketing who've worked around the clock for the past few months to pull this event together. Just before I hand over to the principals, just a couple of housekeeping notes. Please use the Q&A for questions. There is no chat facility, so don't refrain from posting comments such as "I agree." Questions are moderated and they won't appear instantly, and you'll also be able to like questions, with most likes being addressed first. We'll address through as many questions as we can through the event. However, we'll try to follow up any unanswered questions with a response in future iterations. So now it's my pleasure to hand over to the Principal and Vice Chancellor of the University of Aberdeen, Professor George Boyne, to deliver our opening address. Thank you very much, George.
Thank you, Tavis, for that excellent introduction. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the official launch of our Centre for Energy Transition. You've probably already picked up the very strong impression that the Centre for Energy Transition is very busy, very lively, very active, very productive, and that's because it's been running for almost a year now. Today we're having the official launch, but the actual launch of the work happened some time ago. The Centre for Energy Transition is a core part of the University of Aberdeen's strategy. Just over a year ago, we launched our 2040 strategy, a vision to take us forward for the next 2 decades, with energy transition as a core part of that strategy. Our strategy builds on our 1495 foundational purpose of being open to all and dedicated to the pursuit of truth in the service of others. And we thought long and hard, both internally and in consultation with our external partners, about how we could best be in the service of others over the decades ahead. And we chose 5 topics to focus on, which are relevant here in the Northeast and relevant globally. Those are health, nutrition and well-being, data and artificial intelligence, environment and biodiversity, social inclusion and cultural diversity, and energy transition. We chose these not only because of their relevance to the Northeast and the wider world, but also we could see their strong connections to each other. In other words, if we make progress on one of these, then the others will come along at the same time. In the specific context of energy transition, for example, this is likely to be driven strongly by data and artificial intelligence as our technologies improve and as managerial and leadership strategies develop. Also, if energy transition is successful, and we're confident that it will be here in the Northeast, then we'll see positive effects on the physical environment. We'll see positive effects on inclusion, because as Tavis has explained, everyone is keen on a just transition that brings everyone along with it. And we will see positive effects on health, nutrition and well-being, because energy transition will create jobs, create high quality jobs that will replace the traditional employment in oil and gas that we've had so much of here in the Northeast. And that's essential for the welfare and the well-being of our population. So energy transition is moving at pace. This is something that is urgent and moving very quickly, and that's because a whole constellation of forces is coming together to drive it. Changes in social and public values about the importance of our environment, changes in consumer preferences, changes in technology, and those are really moving very, very rapidly to help to push renewables forward as our major energy source, changes in government regulations, changes in market pressures and company strategies. These underpin any change in social and economic circumstances. I think about the remarkable thing about energy transition is that they're all moving at the same time, they're all moving in the same direction. So this shift is irreversible. Right at the middle of all this sits not only government, energy companies and universities, but, as Tavis has explained, the Centre for Energy Transition itself, which will be interpreting, understanding, tracking the development of the transition process, but also facilitating it and supporting it by developing new technologies and by developing new ideas. So the Centre for Energy Transition will be thinking deeply and acting quickly, which is exactly what we need in this unique set of circumstances. No pressure, Tavis. Of course, none of this, as Tavis has mentioned, can be accomplished by any organisation on its own or by any research and educational centre. So we'll be working very closely with our partners in the Scottish Government, in the UK Government, in the public sector, and the private sector, and the third sector, to ensure that we all cooperate to take the North East forward, to ensure that it is still a leading energy capital in the decades ahead. I'm pleased to say that we have representatives from some of these organisations speaking at our event this morning, and we're starting with a recorded message from Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who is the UK Government's Minister of State for Business, Energy and Clean Growth.
Thank you for the invitation to speak at the launch of University of Aberdeen's Centre for Energy Transition today. I'm delighted to be speaking to you at such an exciting time for North East Scotland. Aberdeen and the wider region will have a critical role to play in the energy transition over the coming years, so I particularly welcome the establishment of this new centre. Decarbonisation has been on the political and the policy landscape in the UK for many years now, and with Glasgow set to host COP26 in November, now more than ever, there is political support for this agenda at the highest levels of government. Our commitment to net zero means we need a strong and joined up policy framework across the whole of government. We know and are reminded regularly by our advisors at the Climate Change Committee that we need to move faster in almost every sector. For decades, the offshore oil and gas industry has strengthened our energy security, keeping us warm, moving us around, and enabling us to manufacture in our industrial heartlands. I want to give a clear message to the sector, which will play a critical role in delivering an energy transition whilst developing the skills and green jobs which are necessary to achieve this. It is crucial that we innovate at pace as industry continues on its path in moving forwards a low carbon future. I am delighted that the landmark North Sea Transition Deal has been agreed between the government and industry, supporting workers, businesses and the supply chain through this shift in our energy system. The deal delivers on several of our key priorities as a government, including tackling harmful climate change, building back stronger from the pandemic, and ensuring that workers and communities do not get left behind. As well as focusing on decarbonisation and deployment of new technologies, the deal includes important commitments to developing skills and promoting innovation. Today, the Prime Minister's 10-point plan and the Energy White Paper represent the UK's blueprint for eradicating our contribution to climate change by 2050. The 10-point plan represents a short to medium-term set of objectives. It sets out a plan to mobilise £12 billion of government investment by 2030 to level up regions across the UK and to support up to 250,000 highly skilled green jobs. The investment covers significant infrastructure build, including in power generation, CCUS and hydrogen, and a major programme of retrofitting homes for improved energy efficiency and clean heat. By doing so, we sent clear signals to industry, setting ambitious targets and demonstrating where we will be concentrating our funding and efforts in the near term. And the Energy White Paper published in December provided further detail on these measures and embeds them in a practical longer-term strategy. It establishes a framework for a decarbonised system that is affordable and reliable, which should act as a reference for policy making for the coming years. I recognise the pivotal role that Aberdeen plays as a hub for the energy sector in the UK, and so if the new Centre for Energy Transition is particularly well placed. I am delighted that the Chancellor has committed to funding that targets this region and supports business to develop low carbon energy. This includes up to £27 million for the Aberdeen Energy Transition Zone, £2 million for the continued development of the North Sea Transition Deal, and up to £5 million additional funding for the Global Underwater Hub. In March of this year, over £31 million was also awarded through the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund to support the development and deployment of Scotland's net zero infrastructure. The funding will help to develop both onshore and offshore infrastructure linked to the ACORN project, which is at the heart of the Scottish Industrial Cluster's decarbonisation plans. Aberdeen is perfectly poised to become a world leader in utilising the pioneering technologies required for the energy transition. Most notably, the UK government has provided funding to the Dolphin project in Aberdeen, the world's first floating offshore wind farm to produce green hydrogen at scale. The pioneering Dolphin project will sit 15 kilometres off the coast, providing 4 gigawatts of power with the potential to heat more than 1.5 million UK homes with no carbon emissions. Taken together, this package of measures demonstrates our commitment to net zero, recognising the strategic importance of Aberdeen as a hub for innovation and the important contribution that the offshore oil and gas sector will continue to play in providing the skills and the expertise that our future needs. So, having now achieved a North Sea Transition Deal, we must work together to focus on the delivery of the ambitious commitments in the deal, which ensures that Aberdeen and North East Scotland remain poised to lead the way in the UK energy transition. The new Centre for Energy Transition at the University of Aberdeen will help the vision become a reality. Thank you so very much for inviting me to join you today.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for that recorded statement in support of the Centre for Energy Transition, and we appreciate the support for the Centre and the whole range of exciting things that are happening in the North East going forward. It's now my pleasure to hand over to our first panellist, Keith Anderson, who is the Chief Executive of Scottish Power. Keith, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
All right, fine, Luke. Thank you. Thanks, Tavis. Thanks for the introduction. And it's a real pleasure to be here today, and thank you for inviting me to join you today on what is, I think, it's a brilliant day, a momentous day in many ways for the university, but also I think a really, really important day for Scotland and for the UK, because the work that the Centre is going to do is coming at exactly the right time. It's a really critical time for the future of the energy sector, but a real inflection point, I think, in terms of the future of how we get to net zero and some of the work that has to be undertaken. As Scottish Power, we've seen ourselves and positioned ourselves as pioneers on this journey towards net zero. We've been on the journey as a company for the last 20 to 25 years, and we were the first large energy company to move to 100% green generation. We have literally shut down all of our coal plants. In fact, we actually single-handedly shut down all of Scotland's coal generation a few years ago as well, moved away from gas. And we've been investing now in onshore, offshore, wind, solar, and all of the money we're investing in the grid as well is also all focused around renewable energy and the transition to net zero. I can honestly, kind of hand on heart now, say that everything we're doing as a company is really seen through that prism of how is it we achieve net zero, how do we get the UK to get there by 2050. But today is obviously not about Scottish Power, it's not about the past. It's really about where we are now and how we get to net zero and how we move forward. And I do genuinely think we're at a really exciting point, as I say, an inflection point, to start answering some of the questions we've been asking for quite a while, but now they really do need to get answered. So questions like, how do we deliver a renewable and reliable energy system at scale to meet the massive demand that we're going to see on decarbonised transport, decarbonised heating, as well as just normal use of electricity? How do we maximise the economic benefits for Scotland and for the whole of the UK from this green revolution, and make sure we get all of the right innovation, research, materials, manufacturing, supply chain through to help the Scottish economy grow. And then also, how do we ensure, and this is really, really critical, how do we ensure communities benefit from all of this and that no one is left behind as we move forward to this new economy? And these are all questions I think that the Centre is looking to answer. I think they're questions that the Centre has a leading role to help try and find answers to. And right now is a brilliant time to be doing that. It's a real mix of technical research, engineering innovation, economic modelling, and then a massive wallop or a massive dose of sociology thrown over the top of it as well. And really, I just couldn't think of a better mix and a better way of going about doing this right now. I think it's just a brilliant, brilliant aim and a brilliant objective. And if you think about, right now, how much we're going to have to ramp up activity over the next few years as we head towards 2030, and we look to do 40 gigawatts of offshore wind. We're going to ban petrol and diesel engines. We're going to have massive cuts in greenhouse emissions. We're going to have to decarbonise heating. The future is coming at us faster and faster every day. And every day we move towards net zero, the future is going to come faster and faster and faster. The changes are coming faster and faster. So the work for the Transition Centre is becoming more and more important. The industry is changing incredibly quickly. You look at green hydrogen. If you go back 2 or 3 years ago, no one even talked about green hydrogen, and now it's at the forefront of everybody's thinking. How do we get the hydrogen economy up and running? How do we get the investment and the innovation into electrolyzers? How do we link it to wind farms? Floating offshore wind was another one. For a number of years now, we've been looking at it, but it's really been an R&D sector. And now on the back of ScotWind, we could see the massive industrialisation of floating offshore wind. Again, another huge, huge step forward. So in some ways, it's not to be critical, but in some ways, if anything, in terms of the Centre for the Energy Transition, the one thing I would change about it is its name. I don't think it's a transition anymore. I think it's a revolution. And that is what this centre is at the heart of, and I think it's a brilliant time to do it. You're at the heart of a revolution for the future of the country, a revolution for the future of the energy sector, and what a brilliant, brilliant place to be and a brilliant objective to have. I'm really clear for Scottish Power, and I think that the centre is incredibly clear that everybody has to share in the benefits of the revolution. All the economic and social benefits has to be spread right across the whole of the country. Remote communities, socially disadvantaged areas, all need to have access to the benefits of what we're trying to do, whether it's EV charging infrastructure, whether it's public transport, whether it's jobs and training opportunities, whether it's your manufacturing and industrial investment as well. We need to make sure all parts of the community get involved. As Aberdeen knows only too well, communities that have been defined and grown around heavy carbonised energy needs need to find that pathway to transition and to change towards that low carbon industry. It's something I'm absolutely committed to supporting. It's something I think we're committed to in terms of the recruitment drive that we've just started. So we're on our biggest recruitment drive for probably 5 or 10 years, and it's a real hope for me that we see that right across the whole of the sector, that we create these jobs and we create this transition so that people don't just hear the words, they see it, they feel it, they have access to it, and they know it's happening for them and in their local area. Getting to net zero is going to mean massive changes for all of us. It means changes as how we operate as a business, it's changes to the energy sector, it's changes to regulation, but it's changes to people's everyday lives. And that's really, really critical. So without the buy-in of people who work in the companies, the buy-in of employees, the buy-in of communities and consumers, we're never ever going to get to net zero. And again, that makes the work of the centre really, really, really critical in terms of how do we ensure we do that. Help mapping out that path, not just for innovation, but for a job-rich transition, and one that spreads right across all of the communities. So look, brilliant. I'm over the moon to be here today. It's great to join you on what I think is the start of an incredibly promising and exciting and revolutionary adventure. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Keith, and thank you just for that that passion and commitment and the action that Scottish Power and yourself are doing, and we're absolutely delighted to be a part of this with you, and the huge changes that are coming every day, and particularly the fact that energy transition is a technological challenge, but it's also a societal challenge as well. I think you've really expressed that very clearly. Thank you very much for your talk today, Keith. I'd like to hand over now to our second panelist, Jean-Luc Guizou, who is the Managing Director of Total Energies, recently rebranded Total Energies, and Managing Director of the UK Total EMP. So Jean-Luc, it's fantastic to have you along today. We thank you for your time, and we're really looking forward to hear about what Total has in offer going forward. So over to you.
Thank you, Tavis, for your kind introduction, and effectively I'm very pleased to be part of this important event today. As has been mentioned already, this launch of the Centre for Energy Transition is a happy day for all involved as we accelerate our race against climate change. And it's true that, as a principal mentioned, it's not today that the centre is starting. It has been on for a year already, which is excellent. Effectively, research and innovation is at the core of the CET program, and yes, in the last 18 months have shown how important research and innovation is. The COVID-19 pandemic is testing us all in new ways, and as a society we have shown that we can adapt and we can innovate and to build our way to recovery. And you know, the challenge for the climate change, it demands a similar determination if we are to tackle it successfully. And my industry, you know, the upstream of the oil and gas industry is at the front line of addressing this challenge. We must reduce our emissions, absolutely, but we also need to continue producing in a responsible way the energy that fuels our lives and our economies. And we must make these changes in a way that is fair to our workforce, as mentioned already by the previous speakers. That's very important indeed. So I'm here today to say that my company, Total Energies, understands that requirement upon us to produce energy which is carbon-free or carbon neutral. So we are committed to working with society and the stakeholders, the governments, to reach net zero emissions by 2050. I recognize that Scotland has a target of 2045 to reach that net zero milestone. So this roadmap, this objective requires significant investments, including in research and innovation. But it also requires a significant investment in developing the competencies and the skills that we need. And this is where strong partnerships with universities come into play. So some of you might have noticed that I used Total Energies rather than Total. Indeed, as you mentioned, Tavis, to mark how energy is changing and how we must change with it, we have changed the name of our company. So our new name signals how we are transforming from a traditional oil and gas business to a broad energy company. We're changing scale and we are accelerating our investments in renewable energy and also reducing emissions from our existing oil and gas operations, including by either capturing or offsetting the remaining emissions with CCUS or nature-based solutions. These will be key enablers indeed for the transition towards a carbon-free or an absolute carbon-neutral energy. So our transformation as a company will be global, but an important part of it will occur here in the UK and even here in Scotland, in Aberdeen. We have had a long and proud history of exploration and production in the North Sea, and we aim to continue that, but in a broader manner. As you may know, in 2019, we became partners in the Net Zero Teesside CCUS project, Last year, we took a 51% partnership or stake into the Seagreen project, which is Scotland's largest offshore wind farm today. And this year, we were awarded licenses to develop a substantial 1.5 gigawatt offshore wind farm off the coast of Lincolnshire. And in ways, we are as well developing the new technology, which we see as a good potential for the UK and for Scotland, and that is the floating offshore wind projects that Keith has mentioned already in the previous presentation. So across the UK and in the Celtic Sea, this will open the way to renewable energy development as well. And we look forward to opportunities to propose offshore wind project in UK waters in the future. So by having this broad mix of energies in our portfolio, because we still remain a large contributor of gas mainly to the UK economy and to the UK households. So by the mix of energies, we can more easily develop the experience and the skills of our staff, preserving the high quality jobs and contributing to an energy transition that is fairer to the UK's energy workforce. Within TotalEnergies, we have started a so-called OneTech initiative. So that is grouping all of our technical competencies, all of our engineers worldwide into a single organization called OneTech, which will serve and support all of the businesses of the company, including the renewable field and the renewable projects. So we see that happening already in our office here in Aberdeen, where more and more of our technical staff is exposed to this new generation of energy projects, and is being skilled or skilled up and prepared for the new generation, in fact, of energy professionals with the right experience that we will need in the future. TotalEnergies is a new name for an old company. We are nearly 100 years old, but Aberdeen University, which is now over 500 years old, can make us look like a startup almost. From the Renaissance period, I think, up to our 21st century, Aberdeen University has a fascinating history of teaching and research. And the launch today of the Center for Energy Transition shows once again that the university moves with the times and is committed to the advance of learning of the most critical areas. So TotalEnergies is delighted effectively to support the university in this transition for this energy transition center, and we do so with funding and scholarships, and also in delivering one of the first courses that is offered by the CET. So we trust that our support will help the new center make a strong start, and we look forward to a long and mutually beneficial relationship. Thank you, Davis.
Thank you very much, Jean-Luc, for that, and it's really exciting, the partnership that we're developing with TotalEnergies, and we've announced today actually the £250,000 of funding from the Total to support research and teaching in the School of Engineering across a whole range of energy transition activities, including hydrogen and solar and wind energy, CCUS, and of course the launch of our energy transition fundamentals course tomorrow with TotalEnergies as well, teaching over 160 master's students around the fundamentals of transition to take forward. So we're really excited about this partnership, and thank you very much for your time and your commitment today to energy transition. We look forward to working together. So now it's my pleasure now to hand over to our second pre-recorded message from Steve Scrimshaw, who is the Vice President of Siemens Energy.
Good morning. I'm Steve Scrimshaw, the Vice President of Siemens Energy for the UK and Ireland, and today I'm delighted to be here to join you to support the inauguration of the Centre for Energy Transition. Last year, In November, the UK Prime Minister announced his ambitious 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, extending support to clean energy, transport, nature, and innovative technologies. With a 12 billion of government investment, the plan intends to create and support up to 250,000 highly skilled green jobs in the UK. The plan also sets an ambitious target of 5 gigawatts of low carbon hydrogen production capacity by 2030, and we expect a UK hydrogen strategy to be published in early summer. Following the 10-point plan, the Scottish Government released their hydrogen policy statement aligned to the Scottish Government's climate change plan. The policy highlights that the hydrogen sector will receive 100 million over the next 5 years to support a green recovery and Scotland's just transition to net zero. Scotland's ambition is to become a leading energy hydrogen nation with a plan to generate 5 gigawatts of renewable and low carbon hydrogen by 2030, enough power to power the equivalent of 1.8 million homes. This year, a transitional deal has been granted between the UK government and industry with the aim to protect 40,000 oil and gas jobs by harnessing the industry's existing capabilities and to exploit emerging technologies such as hydrogen production, carbon capture, usage and storage, offshore wind and decommissioning. It targets to reduce emissions by 10% by 2025, 25% by 2027 and to cut emissions by 50% by 2030. All of this has been underpinned by public and private sector investment of up to 16 billion by 2030 to reduce carbon emissions. We at Siemens Energy are not just supporting our customers on their path to decarbonisation, but we're also actively working to decarbonise our portfolio. We've recently announced our goal to reach climate neutrality by 2030. Our CO2 reduction targets align with the Paris Agreement and have been verified by the Science Based Targets Initiative. So all in all, a great and exciting time to be in this industry as we rise to the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead of us. We've been collaborating with a number of global universities in the field of research and innovation to drive the energy transition and to make young people ready for the future. One element of that is a planned 4-year collaboration with the Centre for Energy Transition under the University of Aberdeen on emissions monitoring systems. We are hoping that this will give ourselves, the industry and our customers to make better informed decisions for the future and accelerate the adoption of technologies suitable for the energy transition journey. I'd finally like to thank you for the opportunity to say a few words today and congratulate the University of Aberdeen for taking leadership in this important area. And I wish the Centre for Energy Transition a great start and a long and successful future as we tackle the important task that lies ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve, from Siemens Energy, and we're really enjoying a series of discussions that we've been having with Siemens Energy over the past months, and we're delighted to also to have a recent collaboration around new PhD proposal with Dr. Georgios Leontiadis and with Siemens Energy around monitoring emissions and performance from high performance and modern turbines. So another great collaboration that we're pioneering. So it's now my pleasure to hand over to our close colleague, Alison Stewart from Aberdeen Climate Action. And it's wonderful to hear some of the perspectives from one of our really active civil society groups on climate change in Aberdeen. So Alison, thank you so much for joining us today, and we're delighted to hear from you and from what Aberdeen Climate Action is up to.
Thank you, Travis. Yes, it is great to work with the LNG Centre for Energy Transition. Travis and myself and a few others are doing work at the moment on what a community thinks of just transition. And that is ultimately very, very important because we're all part of a community. It's great to hear what's going on today from all the other speakers, but unfortunately, it isn't the only story. While energy diversification is happening right now, a just transition is really yet to come. Very few fossil fuel companies are actually committing to reducing fossil fuel production by the end of this decade. And by 2030, it is crucial. It's all about increasing their low carbon portfolio to meet increasing demand, but this will not keep us within safe planetary boundaries or below a 1.5 increase in global warming. We need action to cut our greenhouse gases right now in this decade, as recognised by the Dutch legal system and shareholders in the US last week. Government and industry need to show leadership and commit to real greenhouse gas emission reductions right now. As we can see from a lot of the speakers, that is happening, but it needs to happen across the board. This is not just an environmental issue, it's a whole systems issue. But when we talk about getting to net zero in relation to energy transition, we are limiting ourselves and our imaginations. We need to think bigger. We need to think holistically. We need to think collaboratively and inclusively, and we need to think of systems change. When we discuss what a just transition means, the main barriers to change are the current decision-making processes are flawed. They allow for vested interests to dominate the conversation and elite few to actually decide our future and the process that we're going to get to net zero, and the speed, which is not fast enough at the moment. Currently, the workforce and the communities affected by energy transition are not involved in either the visioning or the decision making on what that future will look like. But getting to net zero does not just involve an energy transition, it involves all sectors and all parts of our society changing. We have a sector deal, as the UK Prime Minister has said here in the North East, but there's been no discussion within the region, within the communities, about how that money should be spent. It's purely been an industry deal. But we need to work together, and community participation is fundamental in both creating a vision of how we want our society to look by and after 2045, but also making sure that we actually get there. We have this amazing opportunity while getting to net zero to actually create the society that we want, a fair, just, equal, biodiverse, healthy and thriving one. And we need to seize that opportunity with both hands. Everybody needs to be involved in making this a reality. Energy transition is vital, but it's more than an industrial transition. It's more than a supply issue. It's also a demand issue. We need to dramatically reduce our energy consumption as well as change how we make our energy. The two go hand in hand. In order to transition, we need the cooperation and buy-in from us all consumers. But more than that, we also need to involve the community in what they see the priorities of an energy transition are and how they see it can be done. From my perspective, working in community climate change, I'm seeing huge interest and passion and demand within communities to create their own energy. We can see it locally in the Donside Hydro or the wind turbines in Huntly and in Udney, and many more being developed in Colliston and Daviot. The communities want that power to be able to make their own power. These ventures need supported and encouraged by appropriate laws, regulations and finance. Currently, there are too many barriers. We need the local electricity bill to pass into law in the UK Parliament, and a relook at the tariff systems and financial supports given to local energy schemes. Distributive energy makes sense. Home produced energy, like air source heating, makes sense. All these aspects need to be part of the discussion, and it shouldn't just be the big players in the industry and government. We're talking about a new future, and we need new ideas and new solutions, and we all need to have a voice in what that future looks like. We also need to involve people in the decision making that impacts on them. Simply using the magic words of job creation that industry needs should not trump all other considerations, and those considerations should be put under a microscope because quite often they're simply not true and inflated. So we need to involve the community and ensure we consider very carefully what the consequences of any industrial transition decisions might be to prevent any negative trade-offs, especially in our more deprived or vulnerable communities. We need to all sit around the table and talk about what the end point is and figure out together how we get there. There are so many paths that could be taken, and local thoughts and needs should determine what those paths actually are. Business can compromise, as can communities, but they only see the need to if they are in conversation with each other. This should not be an adversarial process, but a collaborative one. Research and just looking around shows that empowered communities make happy communities. To be empowered, communities need to be listened to and supported in taking the action that they actually want to take. Done with, not done to. Embedded and real behaviour change, like system change, only comes through active choice and participation. We will have a richer, more diverse energy transition if we involve everybody in the process. Thank you. Tavis, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alison, and it's great to hear from Aberdeen Climate Action and really emphasising the key role that communities have in the transition to net zero and developing sustainable local economies. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers today. We've had such an amazing array and diversity of views and opportunities and challenges about achieving net zero. So now I'd like to moderate a Q&A session with all the panelists, and we've had a number of questions that are coming through, which we can go through, and I will feed these, I'll respond to some of these questions directly and feed some of these questions for comment through to the panel. So we'll try and get through as many as we can, and those that we don't, we will respond in full after the launch of the event. So I'm going to start in order of likes, since we're sort of linked into social media in this, of per question. So I'll just look at the list, and the first question we have here with a number of likes is, how will the work of the Energy Transition Centre fit in with the planned Energy Transition Zone planned at Aberdeen South Harbour? So I'm going to come in with a couple of comments, and then if there's any further comments from our team. I think first that we're working with the proposal to feed into some of the technical design around, for example, we fed in substantially to the recent workshop on hydrogen for the ETZ. We're very strongly involved in the development of the National Energy Skills Academy to look at opportunities and aligning the training and the education we're doing across all the educational institutions in the northeast of Scotland for building and supporting local employment, training and skills. And we're supporting and we are arguing for increased community engagement and dialogue around the proposal, and particularly looking at how we can align with and support community aspirations for jobs, community energy and sustainable green localities. And this is part of our role as a Centre for Energy Transition, as an honest broker, to be able to bring together different academic disciplines and different partners to have the negotiations about a common vision to achieve net zero. So I'll open that now to any other comments from our panelists. Alison or George as local representatives? No. Oh, okay, I will move on to the next question. Looks like here you'll have 4 likes. So this one from Kirsty in the audience. I think it's really helpful that we're talking about not leaving individuals and communities behind in the transition. However, I'm not convinced that the communities who are at risk of being left behind have a loud enough voice. How do we avoid leaving them behind by accident? And how do we ensure that all the consequences are explored and negative ones for these communities are mitigated? Well, just a brief comment for me is that last week, and I'll hand over Alison to give you some notice for this one in the communities camp, but last week we held one of the first Just Transition summits in the northeast of Scotland for empowering communities, where we had great representation from a whole range of different community organisations, local government and business coming together to discuss, to identify solutions and challenges of how we can empower communities to engage in the just transition and what it means for them in very practical terms. And this is a part of a project of the Scottish University's Insight Institute, where we're going to be developing a community toolkit and series of resources for communities to engage in this process going forward. Alison, do you have any comment on that question?
Yes, no, that is crucial, and that's what we're working with as well, Kirsty. Really, what we need is channels of communication. That is what's key. So we need different ways of doing it. We need to have obligations, I believe, on government, local and central, to really listen to the communities, to really consult with those communities. And we don't just mean going and saying, this is our plan, what do you think of it? But actually saying to them, what should our plan be? And so what we need is, we need people's assemblies, we need citizens' assemblies, depending on how much money you have, or juries. We need social media input. We need to think about different ways in which we can do it. And the trouble is that we don't have enough research and at the moment about how we can really get into communities in a big way. One of the best ways is, though, using pre-existing organisations within those communities where there's existing trust there and going to them. Yeah, I think I'll pass it over to Keith, sorry.
Hi there, yeah. So the other thing I would say is, and you know, where the opportunity lies, is a lot of the work that has to go on over the next 10, 20 years is around investment and the rollout of infrastructure. Okay, and that presents a huge opportunity to help with the just transition, because infrastructure investment by its very nature tends to be spread and dispersed right across the whole of the country. So that's a good point and a good start point. And through doing that, you can start to involve local communities and get local communities. What we also need to see sitting alongside that is the devolvement of regulatory process as well. So, you know, there's no point in me sitting in Glasgow in a building here, working alongside Ofgem, who sit in a building in London, trying to dictate how the electric vehicle charging infrastructure should be spread out across the Grampian region. And that's just bonkers, completely bonkers. So what we need to do is to make sure some of those processes truly involve the local community and the local areas about where is it they want the infrastructure, how do they want the infrastructure, who needs access to the infrastructure. You need to link it to, you know, public transport issues, to local community issues. So all of that needs to be devolved down the way to ensure that it's not, as Alison said, it's not just about telling people, look at this, haven't we got a great plan? It's about getting them involved and here's how we want it to work in our area. But if you look at that across EV charging, you look at it across the decarbonisation of heat networks, if you look at it in terms of hydrogen projects and the dispersal of hydrogen projects, all of these at their heart are going to be local community projects. Decarbonisation is a local community activity. It is not a centralised process. Despite the fact that targets like decarbonising by 2050 are centralised defined targets, the actual implementation of it, the delivery of it, and the planning of it is a community activity. And that's why, you know, I'm optimistic about it. You know, like Alison says, there's lots of pitfalls and traps and mistakes that have been made in the past, but you have to be optimistic about it because it is by its heart a community activity, and we are decarbonising our communities, and therefore the communities have to be involved in it, and that's why the just transition part of it should work. And then the only other point I'll make briefly as well, which is in working with sectors like the oil and gas sector, you know, it's not about going around with a baseball bat, beating people over the head, telling them they're bad. It's about how do you manage this whole process. I mean, this is a massive, massive economic change and job change about how you shift and do that over time. And again, it's about working with people and involving people to make sure we do it in the right way. But I am massively optimistic that we should be able to get that right.
Thanks very much, Keith. And George, you had a comment as well.
Thanks, Tavis. I think Alison and Keith have made some really important points about community involvement and community activism. I would just encourage everyone not to forget the formal channels of representative democracy, because ultimately that's where these big decisions will be made. They'll provide a framework within which community activism can make a really positive difference. But it's really important that we continue to connect with our elected politicians in the city and shire here in the Northeast and in Murray and in the Scottish Parliament and the UK Parliament, so that we're influencing decision making and investment decisions. If we put all of that together, along with working closely with companies who are well motivated to do the right things here, but perhaps now and again could be better informed, then I think we'll get to the right place through that collective effort.
Thank you, George. And I note with a lot of interest that the Scottish Government, the recently elected Scottish Government, has appointed a Minister for the Just Transition as well. I believe it's Richard Lochhead from the North East region as well, further underlining that working with industries, with our expertise in the oil and gas sector and working with communities is going to be central to this mission going forward. So I'll move on to another question now. So this one, it's equal first. So how would the centre like external entities to work with it? With the mention of machine learning playing a key part, how do we get involved? That's an easy one to answer. I can take that one. Just drop us a line and get in touch. Our door is open. The CET, Centre for Energy Transition, is a one-stop shop to the broader expertise and services and research groups within the university. So whether you want to work more on the social side or the engineering side or with geosciences or with the legal side, we can provide that conduit for you to the right team. We have 17 champions that knit together half a dozen of our schools, and we aim there to get back to you as quickly as possible and to open the doors for collaboration. So use us as a one-stop shop, get in touch, and we can initiate a discussion with you and with all our partners about moving forward. I don't think there'll be any further comment on that question. Okay, this one here from David Lynch in the audience. Excellent momentum, great stuff. Well, we like comments like that. Thank you, David. With a continued requirement for oil products, including improving the efficiency of oil and gas extraction, will be a key plank in the transition, as well as the excellent work in new energy proposed. Is the centre planning to support oil and gas operations to become more efficient on costs and emissions? I worry we jump on the new flavours and forget there's a lot of potential to improve the impact of incumbent oil and gas operations on the climate. I'm going to hand over to Jean-Luc. I think he's smiling. You can see that question coming for him there, but certainly any other comments from our panel. Over to you, Jean-Luc, if you care to answer.
Thank you, Dave. And this question from Dave is effectively central to our discussion today and to what we are aiming at as collectively. The energy transition effectively needs that we start by doing everything we can to reduce or eliminate the greenhouse gas emissions from the current oil and gas production. The fossil fuel and gas in particular, for what concerns the UK, will be one of the key enablers to the just transition that we are mentioning and discussing this morning. And as a company, we are absolutely committed to working technologically, working in terms of mindset on identifying our sources of emissions on our installations and going after them to reduce them. We have a roadmap that is now in place. We have cut by about 15% our greenhouse gas emissions over 18 months here in the UK in our offshore operations. So the technology, and the support from research from the universities will be also key for the industry, in fact, to deliver this. But there is a genuine willingness and momentum within the industry here in the UK to achieve that. It's quite important. We are doing a lot of digital development as far as our company is concerned, and that helps us to effectively abate or eliminate, in fact, our emissions. And by the same token, we are growing, obviously, our business in the pure renewable energies. We mentioned the offshore wind farms here in the UK. So, as I said in my introductory note, we are scaling up, in fact, our staff and our engineers to be able as well to support that new business.
Thank you very much, Jean-Luc. Alison, do you have a comment there?
Yeah, I just like to say that we stress that in order to get to net zero, we need to actually reduce to zero pretty much our oil and gas production, our fossil fuel production by 2045. There's no getting away from that. If we don't, then we're screwed, quite frankly. So yes, in the meantime, there has to be a transition, and that has to be managed one. So we can't just shut down our oil and gas. And yes, we have to green our basin, but that isn't going to be enough. We actually do need reduction. And all the technologies out there to get us to 2050, to get us away from fossil fuels. And we need to be concentrating on that. And oil and gas companies, like every other company, have a role to play in that. But the reduction of actually producing oil and gas is nothing compared to the reduction that we need in the kind of combustion of oil and gas and fossil fuels. And that's what really needs to change. And that's why we need to be going out and looking at these renewables, as Jean-Luc was saying. And that's also why we need to be looking at reduction of energy demand as a priority as well. And the use of oil and gas and other fossil fuels in the making of things can be reduced as well. There's so many other alternatives out there. So let's not get away from the fact we need to reduce our fossil fuel production. Thank you.
Just a brief comment from myself on that. I think also that we are going to see, and there's a lot of scenarios out there, the IEA recent report, for example, even the forecast by BP itself, we're going to see, you know, dropping of demand for oil and gas projects over time. But transition is not a cliff edge. It is a managed transition out of these products, and particularly in relation to a just transition, we really need to get this balance right to avoid major and social and economic impacts, whether that's affordability for communities to access new technologies. And so the dropping demand for oil and gas needs to be complemented by increasing demand for low carbon products, technologies and services. And I think that's one of our key missions here for the CET, is to really increase this demand and acceptability and affordability and reliability of low carbon products and services and technologies, so we can increase the demand and the uptake of them, so we can manage this transition. Okay, I'll go to another question now if there's no more comment. This one here from Nigel Holmes from the Scottish Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association. This one's for Keith Anderson. Keith, so I'll just give you a notice there. I'll read it out for slowly for you. It's does offshore wind and hydrogen fit a cookie cutter approach which allows for replicability and economies of scale?
Cookie cutter indeed. Right, okay, I'm not too well. Yeah, there you go. That's one way of putting it, cookie cutter. Well, I think there's a lot of work to do around hydrogen. And what is it we want the hydrogen economy to look like? What is it we want to use hydrogen for? Okay. Undoubtedly, I think there's a massive role for hydrogen to play in the decarbonisation of industrial process. Okay. So there are lots of big industrial processes that use heat, and predominantly they use thermal heating sources, and therefore hydrogen looks like a brilliant potential solution for that. Lots of work needs to go in still to further innovation and research, and drive down increase the investment and drive down the cost of the technology to get green hydrogen. The linkage to offshore wind and onshore wind is an obvious one, because the hydrogen ultimately has to end up being green, and that's a critical part of this. I think then beyond that, it's the other uses of hydrogen that we still need to explore, which is again, I think there's an obvious one around difficult to tackle transport solutions. So some of the bigger, heavier goods vehicles, potentially some of the more remote transport issues as well. And then there's the big unknown, which is, do you use hydrogen as a heating source, a domestic heating source? Okay. Now, right now, my view on that is no. I don't think that's a feasible, optimal solution, because I think it becomes phenomenally an inefficient use of energy and an inefficient use of hydrogen. But I can understand why people still want to look at it and people still want to do some research around it. But certainly, linking offshore wind and onshore wind up to hydrogen production, absolutely 100%. The other trick around hydrogen and where do we do the hydrogen and produce the hydrogen is around its storage and its transportation. So the more we can do localized hydrogen projects, the better. So, the kind of ideal solution, we've laid a couple of these projects out already. We're working with companies like Diageo, where you do a small scale renewables installation, a hydrogen electrolyzer next to it, the storage there, and the industrial usage is right next door to the hydrogen production. Or you create hubs where industries can link into in and around one area, because you don't really want to be transporting the hydrogen from one end of the country to the other. So lots of work to do. The most important thing right now, though, from the government, and whether this is at a Westminster level or the Scottish level, is to start mapping out the pathway for hydrogen. because we still don't have that pathway. And if you look at the success of onshore wind, offshore wind, you look at the success of what's happening in the decarbonisation of transport, it's because a pathway has been laid out, dates have been set, and therefore investments flooding in, innovation is flooding in, and projects are coming forward. And hydrogen's still kind of stalling just now because nobody understands the pathway. So the big push we're giving the government, and I would say, for work for the centre and for others on this call, is we need to keep pushing the government to lay out that pathway, because that's what will encourage the flood of investment and the push forward.
Thanks very much, Keith. So we have time for just a couple more questions as near the end of this fantastic session. Well, first one's quite an easy one. So simplistic, but it's what are the University of Aberdeen's key strengths in relation to research in energy transition? Well, we have over 150 staff working on energy transition topics across the university, across a whole range of our schools. So diversity and interdisciplinarity is our key aspect here. We come at this from engineering to law through to sociology, social sciences and geosciences. We channel these through our 8 themes of the centre. So I could just mention a couple of the specialities that we are developing within 8 themes. In our renewable generation theme, we're going to focus on looking at offshore wind, large-scale offshore wind development, and also community energy development, diverse local community energy schemes as well for our renewables theme. In terms of our carbon capture scheme, we have a lot of expertise in looking at BECCS, so bioenergy, particularly in the rural context in the northeast of Scotland, and linking that to carbon capture and storage, and also bringing together the geotechnical, the engineering, and the societal elements of carbon capture and storage as well. In our hydrogen theme, we are very interested in looking at developing and innovating around much more efficient forms of electrolysis for producing hydrogen, including direct solar production of green hydrogen. We're also innovating and developing new technologies around storage, so innovating around different battery storage systems and fuel cell systems. And another area of specialization for us is looking at how we facilitate, map, understand, and promote a just transition, working directly with communities and elected representatives to map out what a just transition actually means for communities and how that can be plugged in to the industrial changes that are happening as well, how we can get mutually beneficial outcomes for both industry and communities in this mission. So that will be some of the specialisms that we're developing within the CET across a very diverse institution. Probably just one more question now. I'll go to the top. Given that, this is George Yule, given that oil and gas still has a key role to play in the energy transition journey, is more education required for society at large, i.e. blue hydrogen, CCUS, etc., to overcome the somewhat poor image of the industry? That's from George Yule. Any comments on that, panelists?
Tavis, I can offer a comment on this. Effectively, it's a good point, and you may know that as an industry in the UK, through our association Ology UK, we have launched a stakeholder engagement program, which is exactly about that, going to the communities and establishing a dialogue, in fact, with the stakeholders at large, to tell about what our oil and gas industry is today and what we are committed to in terms of the roles that we want to play and that we expect to play in the transition. So it's important, in fact, because to get to net zero by 2045 or 2050. We cannot do that alone. We need to do that collectively. We need to do that with our customers. We need to do that with the government. We need to do that with the academy. So it's very important that knowledge and proper information, in fact, on the energy world, including the oil and gas part, is known from our large communities. So we have that initiative going on now throughout the country.
Thank you, Jean-Luc. Keith, you had a comment there.
Yeah, look, just pick up what Jean-Luc said. I think that there's always a need, and there's a massive need for a continued education and information program about net zero in its entirety. Okay, the advantage we've had up until now in the way we've tackled net zero is we've done the bits that are easy to do because they're the bits that don't really affect people's lives. Okay, now, as much as for a company shutting down a coal plant and building a whole lot of wind farms is a big, huge, technical, difficult thing to do, okay, for a consumer, for a citizen, it's completely invisible. Okay, because you go home at night and you put the light switch on and you have no idea at all that any change has taken place. What we're facing now and we're getting into now is asking people to completely change the way they live their lives, to completely change how we work as a society, to change how business works, to change food production, to change what we eat. Decarbonising transport isn't as simple as chucking a battery in the car and thinking tickety-boo, it's all done. It's not. It's about changing the way we use transport and how we move about the country. Decarbonising the heat system isn't as simple as ripping the gas boiler off the wall and putting in a heat pump. It's about changing how we heat our homes. It's about changing how we live, how we use heat. It's about changing the entire structure and fabrication of houses as well. If it was as simple as technology, we would have done this already. It's not. This is much, much more complicated. So there is a constant need for education, information, and involvement of people in getting people to buy into this, because unless people buy into it, unless people want to do this, you cannot do net zero to people. People have to want net zero. They have to want to take part. And that's all part of the ongoing education. And that's where the work of the Centre and other organisations like this becomes so critical. It's about getting that information out there and getting that understanding out there, because that's, this isn't about scaring people, but it's about informing people and involving people. It's a colossal task.
Thanks very much, Keith. And Alison, we'll just have to wind up, but over to you for a final comment.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that's pretty much what Aberdeen Climate Action does. We've created new networks within North East Scotland Climate Action Network, for instance, which has 21 community groups. But we go out there every month and do a climate cafe. Our climate cafe is on tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, and it's about CCS. And our last one was about hydrogen. We get the best people. Got a university professor from Stanford coming as one of our guests tomorrow, for instance, to talk about these issues, to get questions and answers, to really push that discussion on. Also, what we're doing is we're going to go to COP, and we're going to involve the North East, going out into all these different communities, more deprived communities, different communities, more multicultural communities, to really ask them what their vision is for our society, get the conversation going. As Keith was saying, and as Jean-Luc was saying, education is critical, and involving people in that decision making is critical. And when you involve people in that decision making, then that's where you get real embedded behaviour change. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. And just before we wind up and we give over to Professor Boyne for the closing remarks, I'd just like to thank all our panelists for an absolutely stimulating, fascinating discussion. I could continue this for hours, to be honest, but we do have to wind up, unfortunately, and maybe we can continue this in the future with future events. We take our role in the CET and the university very seriously in terms of our local and our regional engagement, but also our global engagement as well, as we work with different places, different nations, different communities on their energy transition journey. And we're doing both our local focus and our international focus. We also want to practice what we preach as an institution as well. We have a high-level commitment in Aberdeen 2040 to be net zero for 2040, and we have in place and are developing a whole raft of programs to decarbonise our own campus and the activities that we do here in the system as well. So I want to thank everyone today for a fantastic discussion, a great set of questions. It really underlines our role in the CET as a place for discussion, a place for debate, a place for examining the evidence across all aspects of energy transition, from the technological through to the economic, through to the social, which reflects the mission and the challenge of achieving net zero. So on that note, George, I'd like to hand over to you for your closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tavis. I'm conscious that we're already out of time. We've had a fantastic set of presentations by our speakers. Thanks to all of you for that. Really interesting questions from the audience. This is a huge agenda for the university and the world. Our contribution is to combine thinking and innovation on technological change with behavioural change. And the Centre for Energy Transition and the university as a whole are set up to do exactly that, but we can only do that successfully through conversations like this and collaborations with our external partners. So thanks for being with us today. Please keep talking with us, and collectively, we're all set to make a good job of this. Thank you very much, and goodbye all for now.